Welcome to Planning Ahead with CMS. Successive governments have promised to reform how developers contribute towards their local areas. In this episode, we'll take a deeper dive into planning conditions and Section 106 obligations. Planning conditions are attached to planning permissions and are used to make unacceptable developments acceptable. They regulate when and how development can be constructed, used and operated. They do not enable financial contributions to be made towards infrastructure items. Conditions can have different triggers. For example, remediation work or archaeological investigation will be done before you start on site, whereas delivering highways or a management plan for student accommodation will be done before you occupy. And then there might be ongoing compliance conditions. For example, deliveries have to be at a particular time, or planting and landscaping will need to be maintained. There are 6 legal tests that planning conditions must comply with. For example, they must be necessary and related to the development. Developers can modify a planning condition by applying for a non-material amendment. This is a pretty quick process with a 28-day determination period. This amends the existing planning permission rather than resulting in a new one. If you want to do something more chunky, you can apply for a minor material amendment. This will change a condition in a planning permission. This is a full application process and result in a whole new permission being granted. The Section 73 or minor material amendment process cannot be used to extend the expiration date for a planning permission. It also can't be used to change the description of development. For example, you cannot change whether a building is used for being a shed or being a swimming pool. That must stay as it was originally. It is possible to appeal to the Secretary of State against a decision to grant planning permission subject to conditions which are unreasonable. See our next video on appeals for more details about how that works. Looking at Section 106 obligations or Section 75 agreements in Scotland, these are a bit different. They're formal agreements that are drawn up as contracts between the developer and the local council, which require developers to either contribute financially towards local infrastructure and services or provide works, for example, a new school or community hall to serve a residential development. Section 106 obligations bind the land. So that means if you buy a site that has planning permission, you'll be bound by any agreement that's already been entered into. They're used for all kinds of different purposes, including prescribing the nature of the development. For example, a particular percentage needs to be delivered as affordable housing, and also to compensate for loss or damage created by the development, say through biodiversity net gain or through damage to green spaces. Planning obligations are subject to reasonable tests. It's very similar to planning conditions. It's worth flagging that there's also this concept of community infrastructure levy in England. This allows bigger things, bigger infrastructure items like bridges and train stations to be funded. These items are not strictly related to the development, but it works as a development tax where each square metre you create results in an additional charge. It's really important that your team makes sure that you're not being double charged between your Section 106 obligations and your community infrastructure levy. There's no community infrastructure levy in Scotland. In the next episode, we're going to talk a bit more about planning appeals.